Hi, I'm back with Thelonious Monk, His Life in Music. Let's see where we left off. We're on the chapter called Bag's Groove. In his solo, Monk first devises, in a tight swinging rhythm, a two-note motif against the breathing beat of bass and drums, then develops it over the course of two choruses. In the third chorus, this development undergoes a tonal and rhythmic expansion that excites tense expectation. In the fourth chorus, this tension is relieved with a series of rhythmically capricious chord clusters of a deeply probing character that tests the limits of tonality. The piano hints at an underlying 3 against 4 movement. The contrapuntally operating walking bass, anchored steadfastly 4 to the bar, answers at the end of the chorus with a 3 against 4 phrase. Thus it functions as more than a ground foil. It heightens the rhythmic tension in a new way. Again, Kenny Clark, who, unlike the otherwise so competent Art Blakey, never yielded to the temptation to comment on the surface structure of Monk's rhythmic patterns, punctuates with spare accents the deep structure of the overall rhythm. He highlights the moments when the phrasing of the piano intersects with the counterpoint of the bass. With good reason, Max Roach once called Kenny Clark the Thelonious Monk of drummers. After this tension-laden tour de force, Monk, in an abrupt departure, switches to the use of the right hand that avails itself only sporadically of support from the left. He returns with rhythmic variations to elements found in his playing of the second chorus. Pauses function as dramatic elements. Triplet phrases are heard by implication without actually being voiced. Ever more bizarre downward leaps heighten the sense of tension, which is also enhanced by percussive note-bending effects. Miles Davis's 3 choruses before the reprise, again accompanied only by bass and percussion, strive in their entirety for a classical balance of strictly horizontal logic, simmering blues vitality, and vertical, harshly percussive blues motifs. It is fortunate that by the end of 1954, recording techniques had advanced to the point where a track was produced satisfying even for listeners on today's sophisticated stereo equipment. Both takes of The Man I Love illustrate in an extreme form Monk's technique of playing the theme melody with daring variations of its note values as a solo. Milt Jackson doubles the tempo after the trumpet solo. The rhythm section maintains double time through Monk's solo. In the A section, he plays the substance of the theme as displaced elements in the original slow tempo, thus creating an effect of augmentation. With the rhythmic and harmonic tensions, his specific treatment of the theme melody becomes at once the creator and accompanist of a silently played solo of implications that are only made explicit by the piano in the B section. In the bass too, rhythmic tension is created through counterpoint. Kenny Clark proves once again that he was the ideal percussionist for Monk, with the way he grasps the underlying rhythmic structure. It is unfortunate that before he moved to Paris in 1956, he only appeared in the studio with Monk on one other occasion. The next chapter is entitled The Composer. Thelonious Monk is an extraordinary example of a creative talent who is corrupted by nothing. He has accepted all the challenges that one must accept if one wants to create music in the jazz idiom. Because he was perhaps fortunately not exposed to the tradition of classical Western music, or for that matter to anything but jazz and American popular music, he created a unique and astoundingly pure music by utilizing their external forms, supporting them with deeper structures. No less a figure than the pianist Bill Evans, who some may regard as the antithesis of Thelonious Monk, has expressed his admiration for the creations of his colleague in these words. The general recognition of Thelonious Monk as a composer preceded by over 15 years his recognition as a pianist. His composition, Round Midnight, was played by the trumpeter Cootie Williams' big band even before the Minton days. To be sure, William used his own B section in order to collect royalties. But for the beboppers too, Monk's compositions soon attained the status of standards. They played 52nd Street theme, and in general took great interest in what he wrote. Gil Fuller, arranger for Dizzy Gillespie's big band, reports how eager he and Dizzy were to keep him in the band for the sake of his compositions. And this despite Monk's rather broadly conceived idea of startup times and his general unreliability. In fact, these factors were to finally outweigh their eagerness to retain him. Up until October 1952, Monk's repertoire consisted of 23 of his own titles, of which Epistrophe, Straight No Chaser, and Well You Needn't in particular attained the status of standards. In his following 3 years with the Prestige label, he added 16 more originals. Of these, Bemsha Swing and Blue Monk became standards. In the subsequent 7 years with Riverside, the number of originals decreased to 13. Among them the classics Brilliant Corners and Crepuscule with Nellie. But these are so stamped with Monk's musical personality that in his lifetime few others ventured to play them. Increasingly, Monk reviewed and played old compositions, and the number of originals produced in his CBS years from 1962 to 1967 shrank to 10. Bill Evans' remarks apply to Monk's themes in the sense that almost without exception, all are either in the 12-bar blues form or in the traditional 32-bar song form. What makes these simply some of the best-known themes in jazz is that Monk was able, working within these parameters, to achieve thoroughly unique and masterful results. When you first hear a Monk composition in AA-BA form, it is immediately clear that the B section is a dominant element in the whole theme. Monk's choice of language is revealing here. While the B section is often called the bridge, and in fact, often serves only as a device to get back to the A section, for Monk, it represents represents what he called the inside of the composition. His blues numbers are also more than the usual 4-bar riffs. Even when they are constructed that simply, the rhythmic displacements always ensure that an overarching thematic structure results. Gunter Buell has shown in the case of Straight No Chaser how Monk plays with the possibilities for structural recombination inherent in the form. The theme can be analyzed as either a generic 12-bar asymmetric blues theme in the pop tradition, or as two symmetrical 6-bar motifs linked in AB form. What is special about all Monk's tunes, and what is so fascinatingly elusive and entrancing about them, is their peculiar sense of rhythm. The key lies in what Monk said in his blindfold test about rhythming. The piece swings by itself. To keep with the song, you have to swing. On Crisscross, for many Monk fans his most perfect piece, this innate swing is shown to best effect. The whole tune basically consists of two motifs, each having the character of a kind of melodic shorthand. The first is an embellished descending flatted fifth taking up the time of one beat because of the embellishment actually occurring off the beat. In the 4-bar piano introduction of the Blue Note recording, there is no accent note to relieve the tension created by the interval of the flatted fifth. In the second bar, we do have a release note in the form of a pure ascending fifth on the offbeat of 2. Consequently, the thematic shorthand motif now appears on the 4, pushing the accented note of the following bar on the squared downbeat, but now as a weird, or better say hip, raised fifth. Now the shorthand motif is on the relatively strong 3rd beat, and on the weak 4th beat there is a real release with an accent in the form of a 6. In the 4th measure, finally, the motif is on the 2nd beat, and its accent comes on the 3rd beat as a minor 7th. In jazz, a neutral interval, suggestive of harmonic openness. It correlates with the rhythmically neutral 3rd beat, which is not really weak, but not the downbeat either. The cycle of shifting accents with its correlated intervals and their tonal tensions comes full circle on the downbeat at the beginning of the A section. This description may be enough to show how brilliantly tonal tension and rhythmic displacement are interwoven, creating symmetry by cyclical rhythmic progression. The accented note occurs on each of the 4 beats in chromatic progression, its tonal value being in constant opposition to the rhythmic value or strength of the beat in question. Here it is time to stop and consider that the phenomenon of swing has been described as a result of the conflict between a fixed pulse and the wide variety of actual durations and accents that a jazz performer plays against that pulse. This is the more effective in Crisscross because the quaver rest in the first bar, the 0 accent, to give it a name, stretches the time, and by the same token is responsible for a cyclic rhythmic superimposition of 3 against 4. And with the cycle coming to completion after the first 4 bars, the whole intro acquires the coherence of a miniature overture. The fact that Monk in his later recordings resorted to different introductions will be discussed after a look at the theme itself. By analogy with what was said about the intro, the first 4 bars of the A section can be seen as a prelude to what is in effect the main motif of the whole piece. The reiterated diminishing jumps downward to the first step if the piece is interpreted as in G minor, but with typical Monk ambivalence. It can also be interpreted as being in B minor, in which case G becomes the sixth step, resulting from the chromatic progression of the top notes in the jumping string of eighth notes starting with F. The chromaticism of the accent notes of the introduction already revolved around this first sixth step. It is true that this chromaticism is dropped in the actual A section, thus suggesting a certain release. Yet the chromaticism of the intro continues to be felt, and now its implied expectations are fulfilled in the leaping intervals of the bars 5 and following, making these intervals the main thematic material of the tune, all the more since they too, in analogy with the intro, undergo the same rhythmic and tonal progression. 3 against 4 was a key term. In the B section, we have a different grouping in 3. The main motif derived from the main thematic material of bar 5 of the A section extends over 3 bars, and this group of 3 is repeated once. The first interval of this main thematic material, however, is modulated to a 6, and the movement of the motif steers toward a halt on the 5th step. This 5th step naturally demands a repetition of the whole 3-bar grouping, and the demand is met, as we saw. Yet, the equally classical song form requires 2 more bars. Monk comes up with a crazy but ingenious solution, a tonality blurring run downwards to the flatted 6, creating a false release. Creating a false relation, after which the return to the A section brings a welcome release. In later recordings, Monk dropped these 2 bars. This yields a more coherent tune underlying the importance Monk attached to a song's B section. On the CBS Crisscross record, Monk abridges the intro to 2 bars, and his Black Lion recordings has bars 5 and following of the A section as an intro. Both procedures highlight in their way the importance of the inside of the composition. We saw how Monk used the traditional song form, one of the external forms Bill Evans spoke of, as a vehicle for his deeper structures, yielding a unique and astoundingly pure music. One of his compositional methods has aptly been called montage technique by the musicologist Peter Nicholas Wilson. A minimum of 2 motifs assembled in at least 2 patterns creates a maximum of effect. The other essential aspects of monkishness identified by Wilson are also evident in the classic crisscross. The reduction of musical space, the renunciation of obvious virtuosity, and as attention to the bass notes of the left hand will show, when compared with the implications of the chord symbols, harmonic thinning. That harmonic thinning, combined with Monk's typically angular piano sound, is the reason why even his most emotional ballads never sound overly sentimental, let alone saccharine, at least in his own renditions. The jazz critic Whitney Balliet had something else to add. His improvisations were molten compositions, and his compositions were frozen Monk improvisations. Either way, both are the result of a peculiarly pianistic approach to music. Monk's compositions are primarily works for piano, from Monk's piano to be precise, and it is interesting that he never recorded the blowing line themes that he wrote at the beginning of his career. Example, 52nd Street theme, or did not record them after his Blue Note years. Example, Humph. This particular character of Monk's compositions explains why not very many musicians venture to play them. Even today, the most notable exception is the soprano saxophonist Steve Lacy. For years, Lacy concentrated on Monk material, and he is among the very few who have managed to interpret his tunes in both a personal and a monkish way, without in the least producing what might be called a pastiche. Thank you for watching and listening. Like and subscribe. Catch me in the next video. May you find lasting happiness. Bye.